Have you ever thought about what you would do at 3:30 in the morning if you got a tornado warning? Well, it turns out that I hadn't either. Today, I'm going to share probably my biggest prepper fail to date and talk a little bit about how you can prepare for any weather emergency. We're going to dive into 5 tips that you should follow to make sure that my experience isn't your experience. Welcome back to Preparedness, where we talk about all things prepping and self-sufficiency without all of the doom and gloom. So if you're new to this channel, welcome. I'm Laura. Now, I want to start this video by sharing my prepper fail, which was 100% related to a tornado that we had come through our area a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to keep this story short because I want to get into the meat of this video, which is really about how you can prepare and not experience what I experienced. So picture this, we are sound asleep, laying in bed in our little tiny house up in the loft, and at 3:30 in the morning, both of our phones start blowing up with a weather emergency. We both bleary-eyed pick them up, look at them, and find out that we have a tornado warning. Now, I have to go through the remembering whether a watch or a warning is worse. Warning is worse, and that means that there is a tornado in your area. So we got this notification. We were trying to wake up out of a sound sleep. We had no idea there was bad weather in the forecast, and we really took a few minutes just to even figure out where we were, what was going on, and kind of what we should be doing to get ready for that. We finally decided that, you know what, we needed to get up, get dressed, and get down to his parents' house, which is on the property, but a much more secure dwelling than the travel trailer tiny house stuck up on the hill that we have and that we're currently living in. So we get ready to climb down out of our loft, and about then the power goes out. Now we're trying to stumble around 200 square feet with myself, my husband, and my dog, who was freaking out because there was bad weather in that area. Now we finally got dressed, and we decided we were going to make a dash for it to get to our vehicles, which we had parked in a shelter a little bit away from the house, and we were just going to drive down to his parents' house so that we knew that we were safe. We didn't have raincoats, we didn't have flashlights, we were completely, again, unprepared for this situation. We open the door and we dash out, and about 5 seconds after getting out of the door, all of a sudden the wind changed, the temperature dropped, and I looked at my husband and I realized, oh wow, this just got serious. And so instead of making a dash for our cars, we made a hard left and turned and dove into a berm where we stayed for 30 minutes in the pouring rain because we had no idea where the storm is. Right now it seems funny and I can laugh about it, and I have a great smile on my face while I tell this story, but I will tell you that in the moment, that was a very scary situation. It was very unnerving, and I realized that even though I have been a prepper for 5+ years and I have a plan for things that I knew I was going to face in Colorado with a house full of supplies, that my situation is very different now and I wasn't ready. And so we're going to dive into 5 things that I think you need to be doing to make sure that you are ready for any weather emergency. Number 1 is just knowing what is most likely in your area and having a plan for how you are going to respond. Again, I know that there are tornadoes in Oklahoma, but we hadn't taken the time to really think through what we would do in the situation that we're currently living in. We hadn't thought about how we would evacuate the tiny house. We hadn't figured out how we were going to get to our vehicles. We didn't know whether we were going to take the dog with us or leave him. We took him with us. He was very happy about that. Recognizing that sometimes weather events can happen when they are completely unexpected and unplanned is probably the first and most important thing for you to just know in the back of your head. So once you have a plan, the second step is just knowing the safest place to go. So depending on the weather event, you may need to stay somewhere in your house. You may need to evacuate to somewhere else on your property. You may need to go somewhere in the neighborhood or out of the local area. And in those evacuation plans, you really want to think about where is your family going to go? Like, what is going to be the immediate reaction? Again, we were really slow to react because we hadn't thought through what would we do and where will we go if a tornado comes while we are living in this tiny house up on a hill. And so just by having a plan and knowing where you are going to go, you'll be able to reduce that reaction time, which will give you a lot of valuable minutes back that you could use to get somewhere safe, to get your family out of harm's way. And if you haven't watched already, I have a video on coming up with your evacuation plans, and I'll put a link to it up above. So that brings us to the third part, which is make sure that you are staying informed about what is going on around you. Now, again, you will notice that I said at this very beginning, we had no idea there was even weather in the local area. We hadn't checked our weather apps. We just hadn't been on our phones much, and we didn't have a local TV station that we were watching to kind of get updates on the reports. You want to make sure you have a way to stay informed during a weather emergency, because the problem is at 3:30 in the morning, we lost power in our tiny house, which meant we didn't have good access to information. Our cell phones didn't have great signals because the storm was blowing in. We use internet satellite, which obviously was out because of both power and the storm. And so we didn't have a way to kind of know what was going on. We didn't know if the storm was out in the field next to us or if it was 20 miles away from us. Getting something like an emergency weather radio is absolutely essential. And yes, we do have one, but it is not here with us. It is in my house in Colorado, which is not a great place for it considering I am living here right now. So we have made some changes. We purchased another radio, and so now I have one in each location. You want to make sure that those emergency radios are easily accessible in an emergency situation, because you're going to want to be able to turn those on and kind of keep tabs on what is going on. The fourth one is very closely related, which is have your supplies ready. Whatever supplies you think you will need for an emergency situation, you want to have good access to those. Now, we do have emergency supplies stored here, but again, because the space in the tiny house is small, we don't have them all co-located with us. We didn't have everything where we could just grab and go. We do now. Now we have a bin that sits in our tiny house that we would just pick up and run with that has everything that we might need for an emergency situation, again, to get us to a safe location. So you're going to want to have those supplies ready. And again, we've done tons of videos on this channel about what types of supplies to have on hand. For weather events, you may also want to think about things like rubber boots, raincoats, tarps, duct tape, things that you're going to use to help keep yourself dry and your home dry if somehow a window breaks out or something like that. You want to have those supplies readily accessible so that you're not scrounging around for them, or in our case, when the power went out, trying to find where things were in the house. And one more note about emergency supplies is often in weather emergencies in particular, you will lose power. And that was certainly the case for us. So again, our story had a happy ending. The storm hit 5 or 10 miles away from us. But it did take down a few power lines. Nobody was hurt. No buildings were destroyed, but we didn't have power where we were for over 4 days. So again, we had to kind of work through, okay, what do we do without power? How are we going to do all of the things that we normally do? Now that part was a little bit easier for us. One, because we had a better plan in place for that, because we had kind of gone through that scenario before. But you do want to think about, as you are building up your supplies, how are you going to handle a power outage? Because again, in weather emergencies, those are super common. And the fifth one is just practice your plan. I know it sounds silly, but again, imagine yourself at 3:30 in the morning when you're sound asleep and you get that emergency alert on your phone. Are you going to have thought through it enough? Are you going to have practiced it enough that you will be able to respond quickly for yourself and for anyone else that you have in your house? Again, when our emergency alarms went off, we really kind of struggled to even figure out what was going on. It took us a few minutes to wake up. We were trying to decide what we should do. We didn't have a plan and we hadn't practiced, which slowed that response time down dramatically. So have a plan. Practice what it is that you are going to do in an emergency. If you have an emergency binder, which I hope you do, those plans can be a great thing to add in to your binder to review every so often with your family, so you all know what the appropriate response is. That way you don't find yourself asking each other, hey, what should we do? Do you think we should leave now? Should we put on our clothes? Should we get out of the house? Like, these were all questions that we were going through to kind of figure out what was happening. And then the last thing is, if you have a plan, make sure that if your circumstances change, like ours did, that you take the time to rewrite the plan and figure out what it means either in your new space, if you've moved with new family members, if someone has left or someone has come into your home. Think through how you would adapt those plans based on the things that are going on in your life right now. I'd really encourage you to review those plans like once a quarter, at the very minimum twice a year, to make sure that you have had a chance to update anything that maybe you need to update based on a changing circumstance that you hadn't thought of. Those are the 5 tips I have for you so that you can be more prepared than I was for any kind of weather emergency.